Hello and welcome to Apologetics 101. I'm your host, Brian, and today we are discussing Neanderthal. This is my big Neanderthals video, my big Neanderthal video that I have on my Are We Apes series. And we have today with us Dr. Jerry Bergman, who has like nine different degrees and has spoken and written on this subject matter of Neanderthals, including having a chapter in this book right here, Apes as Ancestors, and a very good section of that discussing Neanderthals. And so we're going to be discussing everything Neanderthal related today. And so without further ado, let's dive in.
Hello, my gentle and, of course, very modern apes.
Sure, I'd like to kiss you goodbye.
All right, but you're so ugly.
Human beings are not just related to apes, but actually aren't.
This is a primate, and so is this, and so is this, and so is this. Hey, that's me.
We are still hominids. We're still primates, mammals, tetrapod.
Well, hello, and today we are here with Dr. Jerry Bergman. Um, and you're associated with Genesis Apologetics, ain't you?
Yes.
That's what I thought. And you've written a lot on the topic matter of Neanderthals, including writing this book right here,
Yep.
Apes as Ancestors, which you also wrote with Dr. Peter Line. I also inquired some discussion with Dr. Peter Line, but that will come up later. But I know you've been on the channel many times before, but do you want to say a few things about yourself and your role in all this?
Well, I spent most of my career as a professor at various universities, including a medical school, doing research in genetics, and published quite a bit. My passion is doing research and publishing, and I'm obligated for about 2 to 3 articles a week. And so I'm up to slightly over 2,000 articles I published.
Wow.
So as far as I know, I'm ahead of everybody else except maybe Ken Ham. Of course, Ken Ham doesn't do a lot of the writing. He has a staff that does the writing and he gets the credit, which is great, does a good job, and Henry Moore. So
He does.
otherwise,
He does write some of the articles on answers in Genesis because I've seen some articles of his that specifically has his byline. So he does write a little bit.
yeah,
And of course, he also writes books too, and I guess his ministry also publishes a lot of books that his speakers anticipate on. But this is awesome. I know we've spoken on Neanderthals before, but I have a new series out called Are We Apes? And I wanted to do a kind of a really big detailed discussion concerning Neanderthals.
the scripture first, God hath made of one blood all nations of men for to dwell on all the face of the earth. Adam and Eve is the center of the gospel, of course. No Adam, no fall, no savior. And so all men would include Neanderthals, as this current research now has shown. And there is a picture of Neanderthals. This shows a picture, 1880, I think, a picture of what Neanderthal was to have looked like. And you can see his body is very hairy, very ape-like. His face, of course, is very, very ape-like. And so this is the image that people have in their mind back then, and they still have that in their mind. Many people do today. Although scientifically, of course, this has been fully refuted which I'll talk about. And 1996, it was still present. And this is a children's book on Neanderthals. And basically, they show the same image that we've seen for the past century. It's very primitive, brute man. And these are pictures found in the Chicago's Field Museum, which is interesting because I gave a presentation there not too long ago, and they said these are embarrassing now, but they are in the attic at the Field Museum. But I've often thought if creationists could buy these, they would find it very useful to show what Neanderthal was seen as for, well, a century. Very primitive, less problematic than some of the other pictures, but on the other hand, you can see especially the Mrs. Neanderthal, she looks very ape-like. And high school textbooks, I have hundreds of these pictures, and they show, of course, different setups, but on the other hand, they also tend to show, in this case, Pithecanthropus erectus and Neanderthals and Cro-Magnon. And of course, the first one of these are seen to be apes, the second Neanderthal, the third Cro-Magnon are simply seen to be just people. And I have a number of slides which illustrate that. So the Neanderthals were pictured for a long, long time, including in textbooks. This is about 1930. This textbook was done. Another picture, Neanderthal in the middle. In modern man, of course, there's quite a difference between the two. And here another picture. Again, very primitive. And on the picture of the jaws here, modern man, Piltdown, orangutan. And of course, Neanderthal isn't shown there, but some illustrations do show him. And this is a drawing of the tree of life. And you'll notice the top, I'm sorry, reflecting the racism of the period. My throat has been, I've been talking too much lately. And there you can see Neanderthal is actually almost near Piltdown now. And then another picture, same thing. Neanderthal is number 2 right here. There's Neanderthal. So this is the evolution of man. And we can see from Java, Piltdown, Cro-Magnon, and white. And this picture shows the same thing, except they're using skulls to show that Neanderthals are very primitive. Picture from the American Museum of Natural History, a very famous picture, I should add, and you can see how they show Neanderthal again as a very primitive ape man. Another picture, same thing, same image that's presented. And then the next slide, there's an 1888 picture by a German professor, Schaffhausen. Yeah, there we go. There we go. Now, how do they get this distorted picture? One good example is of rearranging the data. Now you'll see here, there's a place where the jaw bone fits into the skull, and it would be right here. What they do is move that up, and then it looks more ape-like. And that's done, they say, to show indeed what they thought he looked like. But on the other hand, this is a distortion. And now we know, of course, this is invalid. Thick brow is another trait of Neanderthals. Short, stocky body. Neanderthal population. Evolutionists date this from 130,000 to 30,000 years ago. So it goes way back. And the claim is they existed Neanderthals for 100,000 years. That'd be about 2,500 generations. If that was true, there would be thousands and thousands of Neanderthal bones. I found many, of course, compared to other so-called primitive men, but on the other hand, they haven't found a number that you would expect if indeed Neanderthal lived for 100,000 years. And here you can see about 100 generations and about 50 billion Neanderthals they estimate that lived, given these dating. Of course, the dating is not valid. This is another book by Jack Cousteau, the dentist, and he basically concluded Neanderthals looked like they did because of longevity. He found that as one ages, certain parts of the body, the skull especially, change, and therefore a lot of the traits Neanderthal were changed as a result of simply he was quite old. And this is one of the techniques he used, a cephalometric examination. Went to France and got these pictures showing indeed that this indicates the various traits are a result of his longevity. Now, fortunately, today we have enough bones where we can put together a fairly complete skeleton of Neanderthal. Now, this is not one individual. This is many individuals they managed to get from enough parts to put the whole thing together. And they tell you in these diagrams where they got them from. So it's not a secret. And indeed, they end up with enough bones to build the entire framework, the entire skeleton. And this is Neanderthals compared to modern man. You can see that he was shorter, wider, and huskier. And what they did next was on that skeleton, they put the muscles on the skeleton. And this was done by people who do this for a living. They are quite skilled in this. The most famous example was a skull they found, and part of the body, by the way, the skeleton they found in Nebraska. And then all they had was that. They didn't know who it was. So they wanted to find out who the person was. So these restorers built a body on top of the skeleton. The picture of the face was shown in the papers, and they were able to find who she was a woman from, I think, Cambodia. And they were able to find that she disappeared about the same time the skeleton was brought, or the body was brought there, of course, which of course became the skeleton. And they not only identified who she was, but they found out how she ended up buried in Nebraska. And the reason was she was murdered by her husband, and her husband was found guilty of murder. And it's interesting that based on this reconstruction, it was considered so accurate that number one, she could be identified. Number two, the court trial used that data to convict him. And generally, to convict someone of murder, you have to have a really good case. Well, here you can see they're starting to build up on the skeleton of Neanderthal that they have. And now we can see many more, the muscles, and they have glass eyes they put in and so on. And so by the time they're done, they have a very realistic picture of what Neanderthal man looked like. And here you can see a picture of the complete buildup and the skeleton itself to compare the two. And there's what we have when we're done. And this again is based on science, it's based on evidence, it's based on the skeleton. And we can see what a difference between actually what they've done by using science and what they've done by using evolution as a guideline to draw pictures. And there is obviously an enormous difference. And the next step was to dress them up, put them in a museum. And this happens to be in a museum in Erika, Germany. And it says here, all dressed up and no place to go. And I'm not sure why I can't get this down, but one of these next pictures will show you what it looked like. There you go. They dressed him up. Now, again, that's based on the bones, and that's what he would have looked like. And then on the other side here, we see a female Neanderthal, what she would have looked like. Not the best looking person in the world, but on the other hand, hey, this is one example. If we had thousands to compare, we might find that they looked a lot better than these pictures show. This is one of the most famous examples. They took a skeleton of a girl and built on the flesh, and this is what she would have looked like. Now notice they're still trying to make her look primitive, messed up hair, and the clothing would look like animal skins. So if you dress her up in a nice dress, comb her hair, wash her face, she would look just like one of us. And there we can see a comparison between Neanderthals and modern man. Again, shorter, that's true. but they would make very good football players. They're very strong, very hardy, and a lot of historians believe that the breadth, the thickness of the body was because it lived in a cold climate. The thinner you are, the less likely you are able to deal with cold climates. People who live in very hot climates tend to be tall and thin. People who live in very cold climates tend to be shorter and more built, muscle as well as fat. And we can see that this build that Neanderthal had would have protected him against the cold climate, which he lived in Europe for hundreds of years. Okay, some history now. They're first found in Dusseldorf, Germany in the 1800s. And this was seen as exciting by many evolutionists because they thought, aha, now we have proof of evolution of humans. And so therefore got a lot of publicity, a lot of attention very early in its find, when the find was made. So when they were constructed, drawings and so on, they're made to look ape-like. The problem here is people tend to construct pictures on the basis of a perception. And as we say in the creation movement, we're looking at your glasses, evolution glasses, and evolution glasses distort the world. And indeed, we can see the evolutionist glasses have clearly distorted the world. Brain capacity was an average about 200 cc's larger. But of course, the whole body was in some ways larger. So my guess is they probably just assumed that they had a larger body, they probably had a large skull. And so we can see that initial construction is now wrong. What else do we know about Neanderthals? We know an awful lot about Neanderthals. And a few things are they use jewelry just like people today. They also use musical instruments, and they're able to clean up some of these and try them out. And I'm told that they produce really high quality sound. So they were not cheap instruments. They were instruments that had high capacity to effectively produce the sound that they were trying to produce. They did many cave paintings. We have a lot of evidence of these. They were capable of speech, of talking. They buried their dead. And when they buried their dead, they put flowers, etc., on the burial point. And so therefore, get the next one. Burial sites, there are many, pretty much throughout Europe. And most anthropologists recognize burial as a very human religious act. And the strongest evidence that Neanderthals were fully human is at the 4 sites where Neanderthals and modern humans were buried together. And so now we know that they were not our relatives, they were our peers, they were our brothers and sisters. We lived in the same area, and now we know, of course, that they interbred as well quite a bit. So there's a lot of people today who have Neanderthal traits. And these traits are found today on people as well, although a certain set are found on the Neanderthals. And we can see the difference, modern man versus Neanderthal. And this would be Neanderthal, and this would be modern man. So there were average differences. It's not denied. But now we recognize there's simply another people group, like we have average differences between whites and Oriental persons, average differences between whites and African Americans, etc. And here is 2 skulls, and this happens to be Polynesian. So Polynesians differ from the whites, Neanderthals differ from the whites, and the whites are in the middle, and the Polynesians and Neanderthals are the extremes. So we can see there are differences. That's not the issue. Their larger bill-like chest cavity, they had a wider pelvis. Their bodies were very compact, very dwarf-like, and effectively no waist. And this, they think, as I mentioned, was adaptation against the cold, which is, I think, the valid explanation for a lot of it. Okay, the brow ridge, stocky build. They were isolated for many years, lived in a cold, harsh climate, but they are now recognized today. This is not heteroorthodox. They're recognized today as 100% human. And there we see a comparison between the two. And we find today many people look or have some Neanderthal traits. And a famous evolutionist, William Hamilton, who has written several books, which I own, he had a massive jaw and the general appearance of a Neanderthal. And this, by the way, this assessment was made by people who knew him. And this is a man in South Africa. He's at a dental office, and his dentist, for me, took these pictures showing he had, again, this man had Neanderthal traits. Now, he wasn't an African American. He lived in South America, but he had traits of a Neanderthal. He got permission, of course, to get these pictures. Another famous example is a Russian member of parliament who had indeed very strong Neanderthal traits. And you might say, well, he was, ugly. Well, that's a judgment, I guess. This is probably a better picture showing the Neanderthal traits. And by the way, his wife, his two kids, pretty attractive. And so therefore, I guess she didn't see him as attractive or primitive, just the traits he had. We have a lot of cartoons and movies. This is more strident, called the Neanderthal Man, where we can see Neanderthals were shown to be very ape-like and very aggressive towards women, which is obviously the point of this movie. Another same picture, same movie. And this is a picture from the movie. Okay, Michael Shermer, and he's an atheist. And in Scientific American, he, the evolution atheist, said, this is our Neanderthal brother. So when the evolutionists agree, therefore, it's not controversial at all. And the consensus now is they're just another people group. Creationists don't like to use the word race because there's only one race, the human race, but they are another people group and they are not a different race. And your inner Neanderthal, New Scientist basically announced what I'm talking about now. We're one species, not two. So Neanderthals are just our brothers and sisters. And they're showing that in the headline, which of course the article talks about this in more detail. Probably the best announcement was, and this is 14 years old, so we're not talking about a new idea. And this National Geographic basically said the other humans, Neanderthals revealed as simply, well, the other humans. And again, they still try to show this person as she has facial problems. She needs to wash her face more often. She's got hair problems. So they're trying to show her still as to some degree primitive. They need to show her what she would look like if she had combed her hair and washed her face, etc. But of course, that primitive image still sticks with us. And these are letters sent to the National Geographic. And this is one Gale said, the artist did a fine job of fleshing out what Neanderthal females look like, showing just what she looked like. She looked just like one of us. So even in spite of their attempt to make her in this case, look primitive, she still looked just like one of us. And this is a more interesting comment. As a lifelong nudist, I've seen modern humans that are shaped exactly like that nude Neanderthal woman in your issue of National Geographic. Apparently, Neanderthals are not extinct after all. They congregate at nudist resorts. And this is an interesting comment by one who basically is saying, look, they are just like us. And now we can see what they were pictured as not too long ago. There you can see Neanderthal man, primitive, less modern than us. And interestingly, most of these pictures show very modern human, male in this case, bodies with a very ape-like face. That's very commonly done, which is, of course, a distortion. And why is this important? Well, Christianity Today had an article, The Search for the Historical Adam, because so many Christians believe that indeed there was no Adam and Eve, that we are evolved from pre-Adam people, and they were debating on what this means. Of course, the problem is once they reject human evolution, then of course Adam was Adam. But if they accept human evolution, Adam becomes, well, who knows? And there's books written about this and what they try to propose he was like. And here's again pictures of what they had. And here's Neanderthal and the instruments they used and so on. And a lot of other pictures. This is from a 61 Life magazine book. And again, they're showing you the same primitive ideas. Of course, this is 61. So we're talking about 60 years ago. But there we can see primitive men are still illustrated. There's primitive men, and there's, of course, the apes. And as they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. And they're trying, again, to convey the idea of primitive mankind. And that's the end of my PowerPoint.
Yes, lots of questions we got. I wanted to, before we begin there, when you showed that Neanderthal in a suit and stuff like that, I said, wow, that looks like a politician.
Yeah. In some ways, yeah.
Yeah. And that one you showed with his family, isn't that a famous wrestler too? Or
I think there was one, but this was a parliamentarian.
wow.
And I'm not sure if he's still a member of parliament, but when his picture was taken, he was. And that's why he got in the news, because he was a well-known Soviet Russian politician, parliamentarian.
Right. And
yeah, I think there's a wrestler that also. There are lots of pictures. I had a friend of mine
heard one
just like a Neanderthal, and I thought, well, I didn't have enough guts to ask him for his picture.
the nickel. I heard it was like Nikolai something other. But all right. And so evolutionists, they mistaken this for originally a ape man kind of image, like a missing link sort of thing. Did they do this because they didn't have that much fossil evidence? And when you don't have that much evidence, you tend to your imagination and your worldview and your creative thinking starts just going crazy, right?
Well, yeah, what they believe in evolution. Therefore, there must be proof out there. Therefore, this looks like proof, and therefore they use it as proof of evolution. And they do this constantly. They make comparisons, and they say that, well, this, well, say sample A, sample B, sample C. Well, sample A, we have evidence for that. Sample C, we have evidence for that. How do we get from A to C? Well, there must be evolutionary links. So they find what seems to be in the middle. Now, it may or may not be. It may just be another variation of that trait. But they find what looks to be a link between A and C. And they just say it is. They say, well, this is what it looked like when it was evolving to C. And of course, we don't know that. You got to get the history to know that. And we don't have the history because all we have is bones that we dig up.
I want to ask you about the morphology a little bit more. There's a video out by one, I know you're familiar with her, Erika from Gutsick Gibbon. I know her name comes up a lot
Yeah.
in discussions, but she's a famous evolutionist on YouTube, and I like to call her the queen of the evolutionists because a lot of evolutionists follow her lead. But she has in her video, she has she talks about the morphological differences, and she has like a cast of the Neanderthal, which she starts pointing at all these differences and stuff. And the mouth of the Neanderthal is kind of pulled out. I remember in the video you mentioned that there's a spot on the skull that's missing, and so this allowed them to try to push out the mouth a little bit more. Would you say that cast is accurate or inaccurate, or would you say that the mouth may be pushed out a little bit, but not like to the apish extent that we see on primates?
Yeah, well, again, what you need is 1,000 cases and an average. So the average Neanderthal, and of course we don't have that. We have a lot of more evidence about Neanderthal and just about any other so-called fossil man. So we have a lot of evidence, and there may be a difference in the jaw, but then again, you can find this today among people. So they're trying to look at these very minor differences and make assumptions based on those, and I see that as very problematic. I mean, you're really trying to dig a hole to find information that supports your belief. And that is a problem. You have to look at the world the way it is. You have to take off those evolution glasses and look at the world the way it is. And clearly, when you look at the whole picture, Neanderthals are just another people group. As, of course, we have other people groups today, and they're just another one. And they also find, well, when I had my DNA done, I might forget, what, 3 or 4% Neanderthal? And that's not unusual. My family is from Europe, Eastern Europe, and so therefore, I'm no doubt there was probably a lot of interbreeding between my relatives and the Neanderthal. So I am part Neanderthal, as many others are. So this is not that unusual. And so the fact that they can interbreed so successfully says something very importantly. And because there may be differences in their morphology, it's irrelevant. They're looking like they have, like races have, they're looking for differences to make a judgment. And I see that as problematic, just like they're looking for differences among the races in order to make judgments, derogatory judgments in this case. And this woman is trying to make judgments to support her view of the world, which is, of course, evolution.
She also claims that like where the molars are in the back of the mouth. She claims that there's a space here in Neanderthals where you can like put your pencil if you wanted to across the jaw and that sort of thing. But would that be only if you tried to push out the mouth more and to grant that space between the molar and the back of the mouth?
Well, what my response to that would be is that we know that humans are genetically degenerating. And one degeneration evidence is that we have smaller jaws. Now, part of that is our diet, of course, because we know people in other cultures, they have a different diet and they don't have the problem with wisdom teeth. So, but we have that problem. Many people have that problem. One of the most common operations dentists do is, of course, remove the third molars, the wisdom teeth. And probably our relatives way back probably did have more room, and they probably did have fewer problems with this dental issue, and which is good. But we know we are accumulating mutations. You can debate about the number, but the fact is you and I have more mutations in our body than humans did 1,000 years ago. That's not debated. Just the number is hard to come up with. And so, yeah, I would say that's good evidence that we indeed are degenerating. It's not evidence that we're evolving. It's evidence that we're going the wrong way. We're de-evolving. We're becoming more degenerate, and a smaller jaw would be one case. But then again, you have to get averages, and you have to factor out diet, et cetera. And so there are many factors you have to look at. So people make these claims so often, and they're just irresponsible. And this is a good example.
You would say that some of these traits, like the broadness of the body, the thickness of the body, and not as skinny and that sort of thing. And I've also heard another one with the nose. That's another one that Erika brings up, and she actually does make a interesting point, because she'll say that this warms the air. Larger nostril warms the air in a colder environment. Would you say that some of these traits, like the larger nose, the bigger built, and so forth, are the result of adapting to a really cold climate?
Well, yeah, I'd say they are. I mean, we know that humans are enormously adaptable, and that's just another example of how adaptable we are. But that doesn't prove anything about evolution. It just proves something about the design of humans, and we're designed to do well in a wide variety of areas. Look at the Eskimos. They do well in areas that I can't even think about being in. And I wouldn't, no way would I want to live there, but they do pretty well. They've, for several reasons, learned as physically become adapted to that environment, and they do pretty well.
Right.
They do quite well, sorry.
On the morphological differences, Some people have also pointed to, and then you hinted at as well, concerning the inbreeding, that Neanderthals inbreeded a lot. My understanding from inbreeding is that when you got close relationships, like if you inbreed with your parents are like, say, brother and sister, for example, this could actually result in mutation, especially over time. Would you say some of the morphological differences could also be due to mutations?
Well, it could be due to interbreeding. The problem with interbreeding is that the family tends to have certain sets of mutations. And if you marry someone that's too genetically close to you, the chance is higher that they also have that same mutation. And therefore, I have a mutation, my spouse has a mutation, we're more likely to show that trait. Well, genetically, the best thing you can do is, which was condemned for many years, but the best thing you can do is marry someone of a different race. If a black person marries a white person, chances are he will have certain mutations, she will have certain mutations, but they'll be different. And therefore, neither one of them will show up. And so, therefore, as far as health is concerned, white and black, or white and Chinese, or white and Vietnamese, and so on, marriages are the healthiest because chances are you will not have two mutations which cause certain diseases. Many diseases, you have to have two mutations before it shows up. If you have one normal and one mutation, it's not going to show up. So therefore, so many traits that whites have are not going to show up when they marry a black because the black has a different set of mutations. Some may, of course, it's not a guarantee, but as far as total health is concerned, you're better off marrying a person of a different race. I have a friend of mine who's white and his wife is black, and his wife is also a medical doctor, so they're aware of this. But they have three boys, and I keep telling them this: their head's going to get really big. What already is really big, their mom tells me, but they are the healthiest, most attractive kids you'll ever did see, and that's because neither one of them has set of mutations from the same person. They have different mutations, and therefore they're very, very healthy. And this, by the way, is pretty common. It's not, of course, you have exceptions, but on the other, and she realizes this. She told me, yeah, I know, you have white-black marriage, you're going to have really healthy kids, and that's what we got. We have super healthy kids. And she's a medical doctor, so she's done all the tests necessary, and they found they're extremely healthy. Don't have the diseases that blacks are plagued with, like sickle cell anemia, nor do they have the diseases that whites are plagued with, like Tay-Sachs disease. So, and other problems as well.
Those are caused by
And so
mutations. Is that right? Those diseases?
Darwin was worried about that. He had 11 pregnancies, I think his wife had, and two or three died. I think three died. Two of them when they were fairly young. And he was plagued with the possibility that it could be because he married his first cousin. And therefore that could be an issue between the illness that they had.
Right. And by the way, how do we know that these Neanderthals were living in cold regions? I assume it has to do with where their actual fossils are usually found. Are they
Right.
found in cold regions, or are they found in regions which are believed to be, at least during the Ice Age, covered in ice and snow and that sort of thing? Is that the reason why they think that they lived in colder regions?
A lot of reasons, but that's one reason. They lived in an area of Europe. Now, Europe, of course, has gone through ice ages or semi-cold periods, and they figure they lived during that time of a cold spell in Europe. And so therefore, that's why they concluded that. Also, they're looking at the morphological traits of the Neanderthals, and this evidence of a living in a cold area, or generally cold area.
Right. All right. On the morphological differences, I actually have a citation here from Dr. Peter Line. Me and him was talking about this very thing. Um, and I just want to read this real quick. It says, it seems logical that the genetic information for robust, including Neanderthals and gracile humans, must have been included in Noah and his family ultimately derived from Adam and Eve, or at least potentially for its expression in their offspring. How and when it was expressed is an unknown question, whether Noah and his family all look similar, like e.g., something between robust and gracile humans, or were a morphologically very heterogeneous bunch is hard to know. However, it would be hard to explain the ancient human fossil record if they all looked modern Europeans with vertical foreheads, no brow ridges, and thin cranial vault bones, and no potential for robust features being expressed in their offspring. Actually, I don't believe all Europeans look like that stereotype. There is variability in modern populations also. Then, with a very morphological heterogeneous population at Babel, the subsequent dispersion may have led different groups of people taking different subsets of genes for certain traits, including genes for varying in bone character, which may have involved genetic information involved in regulating the intensity and timing of endocrine production, that is, of hormones that stimulate bone growth, as stated by Conrad and Potzer, 2012, page 546. One suggestion put forward to help explain the general overall robustness of Neanderthals is that the timing and intensity of endocrine production, e.g., osteogenic hormones, may have differed between Neanderthals and atomically modern humans. For example, the clinical condition known as precocious, puberty, is that right? Yeah, puberty, in which there is an early onset and elevated levels of sex steroid production, sometimes producing Neanderthal-like symptoms in modern children, e.g., robust and heavily muscular limb bones with large joint surfaces, thick, narrow, thick cranial vault bones, large brow ridges, projected mid faces, and limb bones with narrow medullary cavities. Churchill, 1998. According to Susan Crockford, an evolutionary expert in this area, the distinctive skeletal morphology possessed by Neanderthals is almost certainly the result of a pattern of thyroxine secretion and therefore of prenatal and postnatal growth rates that differ markedly and consistently from that of modern humans. These Neanderthal traits may resemble superficially the pathological changes associated with congenital iodine deficiency because they reflect different amounts of thyroid availability for skeletal growth at particular stages of development as compared with heavily modern humans. Thus, perhaps genetic information controlling a certain hormone, this is Peter Line talking now, hormone secretion pattern might have existed in people with robust skeletal morphology, such as the Neanderthals, that was different to that of extinct modern humans. Hence, as the people groups migrated away from the Babel variants of human, broadly classified by evolutionists as Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Neanderthals, and modern humans arose through a combination of genetic variation in bone characters, including genetic information involved in regulating the intensity and timing of endocrine production, as well as local environmental factors such as cold adaptation in regards to Neanderthal, in a similar way that other racial characteristics of people groups might establish or become established as time went by. Some traits have dominated in some people groups, likely through genetic drift, but absent or close to absent in others, as stated by Conway and Potzer, 2012, page 548. Some evolutionists believe that the products of genetic drift rather than selection, as seen as such, the features can be exactly incorporated into creation framework. There may also have been considered interbreeding in some of these groups, which may explain some of the more extreme robust features seen in some of these robust human groups. Also, fossil humans having a combination of supposed archaic, robust, and modern gracile features appear to be a common occurrence. For example, Dragon Man. The comprehensive overview of the fossil evidence, evolutionists Cartmill and Smith found something similar, stating that in southern and northern Africa, Asia, Australasia, and Europe, early modern populations retained a few morphological characteristics that evidently derived from local archaic people, end quote. However, this does not suggest that more branches or species need be added to the false evolutionary human family tree. Rather, it indicates that the archaic humans, e.g., Neanderthals, Denisovans, Homo erectus, and modern humans were interbreeding with each other. Thus, by definition, they were by the same biological species. This is despite the man-made classification into different species, such as Homo erectus, Homo heidelbergensis, Homo neanderthals, Denisovans, and modern type Homo sapiens, all fully human. Even some evolutionists, paleoanthropologists have said that some or all of these should be classified as different subgroups of human Homo sapiens, or subgroups of Homo sapiens. For example, Hartwith and Smith advanced the view that all of the one of the above categories should be designated as subspecies of Homo sapiens. They do not give this designation to Homo erectus, but when they're categories of subspecies of Homo sapiens, they do include some specimens usually regarded as H. erectus, such as the Ngandong Solomon remains. Such interbreeding can rise appearance that are sometimes blended in general character, i.e. intermediate between the extremes. For example, brow ridges that are less prominent than in most archaics, but more so than in most modern. And at other times, the appearance will be mosaic, like the HLD6 mandible and individual combining features characteristics of robust and gracile human. Hence, if Neanderthals are the same species as modern humans, categorized as a subspecies of Homo sapiens, even by some evolutionists, and interbreed with modern humans, then differences in physical characteristics are of little significance, at least in terms of their humanity. Only die-hard evolutionists who are desperate to dehumanize them will make much out of differences in the humps and bumps on the skulls. Brings to mind the flawed pseudoscience of phrenology, where study of the shape and size of the cranium supposed indicated character and mental abilities. Neurologically, I see a difference in skull features as meaningless. Evolutionists who make out that difference in brain shape as a result of difference in skull shape result in differences in brain function are simply engaged in evolutionary just so stories. There is no way that you could prove anything like that, which is why there is so much speculation. However, the adaptability of the human brain is enormous, where you can remove half a hemisphere in a young person in people with, e.g., intractable epilepsy. It's a disease, I think. And the other half will take over most of the functions that lost in due courses. Hence, why would a trivial change in brain shape between modern humans and Neanderthals make any difference to brain function? Best regards, Peter Line. So that right there, Peter Line, of course, is an expert on that area of the body. But would you say that that's pretty accurate? That this is an attempt by evolutionists as a way of trying to dehumanize, or because originally they tried to argue that Neanderthals were not humans. Now all evolutionists admit that it's human, and you kind of referenced this also in your presentation, because you do mention that the consensus among scientists is that this is just another people group. So the
Right.
implication would be that to argue that they are another species would either assume that people groups are different species, or it would be literally going against the consensus of even other evolutionist scientists that would argue them as a people group. How would you assess that? Because there are evolutionists online that do think that Neanderthals are a kind of like either as a species or a subspecies of humanity. So that it's like they're willing to acknowledge them as human, but they do want to try to distinguish them as a separate species. How would you
Right.
respond to that?
They're trying to hang on to the old idea. You prove an idea wrong, we've got a huge amount of proof, and they try to hang on to that by these justifications. And that's problematic. You have to realize enormous amount of variation exists in many forms of life. Horses, good example. You have horses that are about as tall as an average German Shepherd. You have horses that are about as tall as an elephant. Some are huge. And so you have a huge amount of variety in horses, in dogs, in cats, and in many other animals. And so therefore this variety is built into the system. And therefore you're going to get, fortunately, I should say, you're going to get variety in people so that when you get to know people, you know who they are, you recognize who they are. And when you travel to other countries, you can see that people are different. They look different. And so the differences in humans is important. And in many ways, we Caucasians are more like the Neanderthals than we are like some of the other groups, like people from Japan, China, and so on. And so when you try to stress how different they are, why don't you argue the same thing with the Chinese? They're less evolved than we are, or more evolved than we are. So why not just use them as a comparison? Because again, there's less difference between us and Neanderthals and us and the Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, and so on. And so therefore, and the Polynesians, I guess, would be the best contrast. And so this is prove an idea wrong, and they try to hang on to remnants of it. And to me, that's pathetic that they try to do that, especially when the scientific consensus is very clear that indeed they're just another people group. End of story.
In addition to that, that video that I mentioned that Erika had made, she tried to argue, well, hey, look, you consider these different species, talking about other animals, and they have these morphological differences. Of course, species is kind of a man-made term and often fickle, because even evolutionists debate about exactly what constitutes a species. But but they'll argue that, and they're missing the overall point, because of our argument about Neanderthals and humans being able to interbreed, and they're missing the overall point of that, I guess. Um, but in the case of animals, even within the same species, you could have morphological differences that could be significant, but yet not to the point where it makes it a different species. Like in, for example, in the case of dogs, you got lots and lots of breeds of dogs, and they look very different in size, different in bone structure, different in jaws, and that sort of thing, and but yet they're all the same species.
Right. That's the
So,
key.
yeah.
Interbreeding is a basic way of determining whether or not two people or two animals are part of the same species or different species. If they can interbreed, they're part of the same species, period.
Honestly, I don't think she would actually hold consistently to it. Like one of the things I put down in the comment section, I haven't had any responses to it yet that I've seen, or at least it alerted to me by YouTube. But uh, but she would not be able to hold consistently because there are morphological differences between different people groups. You know, larger lip, the brow. They you mentioned the Orientals, where they have folds on around their eyelids. Of course, obviously, different skin color, things like that. And she would never sit there and look at something like that and say that these different people groups are different species. She would never argue that. And I'm
Yeah.
not accusing her necessarily of racism. That would be going more into the extreme with that situation. What I am accusing of her of is inconsistency. I'm accusing her of not being able to consistently apply her criteria when it comes to people groups that exist today. She would accept that all of them are part of the same species, but yet she would not argue, but she does not argue that with Neanderthals. There is one little interesting thing that I wanted to talk about. You discussed it in your in book that you co-authored, Apes as Ancestors. You mentioned says when you talk about Neanderthals, you talk about their spine and their ability to walk upright, and you said thus Neanderthals would have had not a stooped posture as was often shown for decades in pictures of him, but rather a good modern upright posture and breathe deeply from his diaphragm. Um, and you said these conclusions are the result are part of a detailed study of recently completed 3D virtual construction of the rib cage. Um, and you conclude with this. You said, in short, they had upright posture with possibly greater lung capacity and straighter spine than present day people. So, in essence, they would be able to walk more upright than we would walk. Is that right? Am I understanding that correctly?
That's probably true, especially that we spend so much time. My wife brings this out occasionally, of course. Well, more than occasionally. And she said, I spend so much time humped over working on the computer. And that's true. It's true with so many of us. Our lifestyle affects a lot of how we look. And I need to remind myself to sit up straight, even when I'm working at the computer. But one doesn't tend to do that because I'm focused on the screen and what I'm doing and so on. And so therefore, a lot of us got into some very bad habits. And of course, Neanderthal didn't have to worry about looking at the computer because he didn't have such developments in his day. But on the other hand, and that's true of so many, well, professors have a reputation for being hunchback. And they do that because they spend a lot of time reading and in this modern age, looking at the computer, etc. And phones, I guess, is one advantage where you can lift the phone up to yourself. With the computer, I've got to move up to the computer. And it's hard to work it appropriately and see the letters and so on when I'm 2 feet away. Right. So I tend to move up towards the screen so I can deal with what I'm working with.
I was thinking that earlier too, after I read that quote, that our posture is obviously not as upright. I have a lot of back issues because of that too. So I do want to play a clip because she talks about the inner ear of Neanderthals. And I want to share my screen real quick.
Okay.
But there's one more that I want to talk about that I think is really important because I hear creationists use it all the time or attempt to use it all the time with regard to the Australopiths. So inside your ear, inside the external auditory meatus, the ear hole here, if you travel long enough and you stick like a Q-tip in there, you can scrape your tympanic membrane or your eardrum. If you perforate the eardrum and go past it, then you have your auditory ossicles. These are your 3 inner ear bones, your malleus, your incus, and your stapes. And these guys are going to interact with like the cochlea that through the oval window and things like that. You've also got your semicircular canals back there, which are responsible for your vestibular system, your balance. The thing about those semicircular canals is they can tell you a lot about how a critter moved, because obviously the type of balance and proprioception required for an arboreal animal is very different from a terrestrial one. And so we can look at the semicircular canals and we can tell a lot about how a critter moved. Australopithecus have semicircular canals that show that they still maintained an aspect of arboreality. That makes sense. It matches a lot of what we see in the rest of their bodies, but you could still be in the trees and be like a biped on the ground, and what their morphology tells us is that they were primarily bipeds that still stayed in the trees some of the time. Case in point, the semicircular canals don't look like Miocene ape semicircular canals. They just look more like Miocene ape semicircular canals than they do like those of humans. Humans have the semicircular canals of like a terrestrial obligate biped. Neanderthals are interesting because Neanderthals have semicircular canals that are also very different from humans. That's important for the creationist conversation because creationists will point to the different semicircular canals that Australopiths have and use that to say, no, clearly they're just glorified chimps because they know nothing about the morphology of those hominins. But I'm going to read a quote for you here because I think it's an important one by Spohr and colleagues in 2003. The labyrinth of the middle ear of Neanderthals is so distinct from that of modern humans so as to suggest, quote, differences in locomotor behavior and the kinetic properties of the head and neck. So the Neanderthal semicircular canals are also really different from those of humans. You can't use them to separate humans from australopiths because doing so would also separate Neanderthals from humans.
She's talking about hearing and balance and so on. Balance is different if you spend your life on all fours than if you spend your life on 2 feet by parallel. And I would say I would want to look at the literature. For her to say that doesn't have a lot of credibility. I would want to see what the literature had to say, whether or not that was found to be the case in the literature.
On what Erika said on the inner ear, I actually did some research about that while I was editing, and actually did a literature search for this, and I found a recent paper that actually trumps what Erika had claimed. In 2003, which is the date of Erika's source, she said, and there was not as much evidence in terms of Neanderthals and being able to do like a 3D image of a Neanderthal and determine their ear similarities as much. But I found a recent paper. This is the most recent paper I could find. I even tried to search Neanderthals 2024 to see if there's anything even more recent than this. This is the most recent I could find concerning the Neanderthals' inner ear. And it was dated to 2016. I'm going to show that and discuss that real quick because this is found in an evolutionary peer review paper. So let's jump on into that. Alright, this is the paper. It's by Alexander Stossel and if I butcher those names, forgive me. Stossel, Romain David, Philip Guns, Tobias Skimitz, Fred Spohr, and John Jacques Hublin. Alright, the title of the paper is Morphology and Function of Neanderthal and Modern Ear Ocelus. So this has to do with the middle ear, which is another name for the inner ear. Diminutive middle ear ocelus, Malus incus stapes. And of course these are actually referenced by Erika as well. Housed in the tympanic cavity of the temporal bone, play an important role in auditory sound. The few known ocelus of Neanderthals are distinctly different from those anatomically modern humans. AMH is the abbreviation the paper choose to use for anatomically modern humans. So that's every time you see that means anatomically modern humans. Despite the close relationship between both human species, although not mutually exclusive, these differences may affect hearing capacity or could reflect correlation with the surrounding temporal bone. Until now, detailed comparisons were hampered by the small sample of Neanderthal ocelus and the unavailability of methods combining analysis of ocelus with surrounding structures. Here we present an analysis of the largest sample of Neanderthal ocelus to date, including many previously unknown specimens, covering a wide geographic and temporal range. Microcomputed topography scans and 3D geometric morphometrics were used to quantify shape and functional properties of the ocelus and the tympanic cavity and make comparisons with recent and extinct AMHs as well as African apes. We find striking morphologically differences ocelus of AMHs and Neanderthals. Ocelots of both Neanderthals and MHs appear derived compared with the inferred ancestral morphology, albeit in different ways. Brain size increasing evolved separately in MHs and Neanderthals, leading to differences in the tympanic cavity and consequently the shape and spatial configuration of the ocelots. Despite these differences, evolutionary trajectories, functional properties of the middle ear of MHs and Neanderthals are largely similar. The relevance of these functional equivalent solutions is likely to conserve a similar auditory sensitivity level inherited from their last common ancestor. Alright, so I'm going to switch over to my Word document. I got it on Word. I usually put it on Word. This helps me find things and highlight things and that sort of thing. I highlighted the abstract and the introduction. All of that's very, very interesting. But the more interesting stuff is when you get down to the results. Alright. And the writers go further in talking about the results. It said previously shown, of course, by the way, if you start reading it, this is all interesting, by the way. Just because I don't highlight it, don't mean it's not interesting. And it shows that they're actually, the differences between Neanderthals and apes is quite significant. In fact, there's more similarity, according to the paper, between the Neanderthals' ears and gorillas than there are apes, ironically. But anyway, all that's very, very interesting, so I would recommend reading it. I will be putting a link to this paper in the, not to my Word document, but to the paper, the actual paper, for you to go over and review. Alright, but this is what they said. Previously shown metric overlap of these groups, 24, likely reflects allometric scaling caused by similarities in body size, 34 and 35, as in the skull, 36, 37. The amount of shape distance between AMHs and Neanderthals is comparable with Incas or even exceeds Malus and Stepes. The distance between AMHs and African apes, hence, just like the inner ear, 38 and 39, the ocelots are valuable taxonomic discriminators of late Pleistocene fossil human remains. Okay, so what does all that mean? It means basically the differences amount to the proportionate body size, the shape of the skull, that sort of thing. But here's what they conclude. Despite distinct differences in ocelot morphology, functionally relevant parameters of the ocelots and the surrounding middle ear structures are largely similar between AMHs and Neanderthals, particularly compared with the African apes, because they're really distinct from African apes. At first, this similarity seems surprising because ocelot-shaped differences between MHs and Neanderthals affect the biochemical characteristics of the ocelots when analyzed individually, particularly the more open angle between the manubrium and the head seen in the Neanderthal Malus caused the bone centers of mass to shift more superiorly, thereby increasing the functional length. However, we also found an increasing in functional length of the Incas that is of similar magnitude. Consequently, the ITR as an estimate for the impending matching function by the middle ear is nearly identical between AMHs and Neanderthals. That is pretty cool. So essentially, although there are differences between Neanderthals and modern humans, the differences are not enough to impede the overall functionality similarity as well as the physiological similarity between that of Neanderthals and humans, which overall the paper concludes is nearly identical. That's what it said, nearly identical. And so I don't think Erika's argument is up to date. I'm sure she's not being dishonest about the paper. In 2003, the evidence was far more limited and not enough to be able to make a 3D diagram of what the inner ear would have been like and in its overall similarity between Neanderthals and humans, modern humans, that is. As an additional note, I have actually found Erika's 2003 paper, and I want to discuss that real quickly because I think there's more to it than what she had claimed. Now, the full paper is not available to me because it's hidden. The rest of it's hidden behind a paywall. But for the purpose of this video and our discussion on that, it won't be relevant because Erika is citing from the abstract anyhow. So we can look at the abstract and the introduction, and then determine enough to be able to know what they did in the uh, study. Okay, let's go there then. This is the paper that Erika is actually citing. She's actually citing from the abstract, as we see, and only part of the abstract. She actually missed a key point in this, but she basically is citing from the abstract, and she says it in her own words at first. She says distinct, that are even more distinct, is what she says, and then she says sizes of the Neanderthal semicircle canals may reflect a pattern of. Actually, she references this, but then she mentions the quote of head movements different from modern humans, possible, and she misses the part where it says possibly related to aspects of locomotive, motor behavior, and the kinetic properties of their head and neck. Essentially, they were to start with, they were arguing only for the possibility of it. And second of all, they actually used a very small sampling, and they weren't comparing it to modern humans the way the 2016 paper did. They were comparing it to a very small sample, and it tells you here in the introduction, it says, expanding upon initial findings of Hublet et al. 1996, this paper presents a more comprehensive comparative analysis of the Neanderthal bony labyrinth. The full morphology of the structure is considered. The Neanderthal sample is increased, and preliminary comparisons are made with small samples of European Middle Pleistocene hominins. These are fossils of humans found in the Middle Pleistocene layer, which obviously they think is a different geological time, as well as early modern European upper Paleolithic humans. So they're using a very small sample from this. They're not comparing it to modern humans. Now, if you actually go up here, they actually talk about this, and right around here it says Spoor and Zonneveld 1994, Spoor et al. 1994, Hublin et al. 1996 concluded that the Neanderthal morphology is likely derived relative to both Homo erectus and modern humans. And this is what they said. Subsequent studies of Neanderthal specimens have established that Dederer 93002, that's a specific sample, from Syria shows the typical Neanderthal labyrinth morphology, Spoor et al. 2003, whereas Mostier 1 appears to have a morphology closer to that of modern humans, and it's this is again references Thompson and Elius. I can't read these names. 1998, Ponce de Leon and Zolikofer, 1999. So this basically shows that the based on the samples that they did use, they found some anomalies that, like, some of them were registering different. Like, some of them were closer than others. So that becomes clear, and that usually happens whenever you have very few sample size. Now, to begin with, they're already using very limited data because they're using the data that they had available to them in 2003 from Neanderthals. And even then, they're only using 15 particular specimens from that, and they're comparing it to very few in a particular layers of strata. So they're not comparing it to modern humans exactly the way the 2016 paper did, and they end up with anomalies where some inconsistencies, like some are more similar than others, kind of thing, and that sort of thing. In addition to that, they didn't have more evidence. With the 2016 paper, they were actually working off all the evidence of Neanderthal, including the more recent findings of that. and then comparing that to modern humans. In fact, that was the AMH abbreviation that they used a lot in the paper. Anatomically modern humans is what that means. And so that they were using that and comparing that, and they came up with a 3D model, and they showed that that this 3D model showed that it was almost identical. The overall, there's some differences obviously, but the overall similarity actually matched that of modern humans, or at least close to identical to modern humans that identify. So that's interesting. But the paper also recognizes those differences. In fact, this actually kind of surprised them because they would expected those differences to make a huge difference, but it turned out that it actually didn't. And so this was surprising to them. And what's interesting is one of the writers of that 2016 paper is Fred Spoor, who's also one of the writers here. Right here. Fred Spoor. So he's one of the writers of the 2016 paper. That's interesting. But they have actually determined then that these differences do not matter in any kind of fundamental way. Now, here's another interesting thing. Let me go to the actual quote. This is the abstract. She's citing from the abstract, but I'm just going to go here because I got things highlighted. All right. You see this in purple bold here. The abstract says, this paper presents a comprehensive comparative analysis of Neanderthal bony labyrinth, a structure located inside the petrous temporal bone. 15 Neanderthal specimens are compared with Holocene human sample, as well as with a small number of European Middle Pleistocene hominins, and early anatomically modern and Europe upper Paleolithic humans compared with Holocene humans. The bony labyrinth Neanderthals can be characterized by an interior semicircular canal arc, which is smaller in absolute and relative size, is relatively narrow, and shows more torsion. The posterior semicircular canal arc is smaller in absolute and relative size, as well as it is more circular in shape, and it is positioned more inferiorly relative to the lateral canal plane. The lateral semicircle canal arc is absolutely and relatively larger. Finally, the Neanderthal ampler line is more vertically inclined relative to the planar orientation of the lateral canal. The European upper Paleolithic and early modern humans are more similar, although not fully identical, to the Holocene humans in labyrinth morphology. The European Middle Pleistocene hominins show the typical semicircular canal morphology of Neanderthals, with the exception of the arc shape and inferior position of the posterior canal and the strongly inclined ampler line. The marked difference between the labyrinths of Neanderthals and modern humans can be used to assess the phylogenetic affinities of fragmentary temporal bone fossils. However, this application is limited by a degree of overlap between the morphologies. The typical shape of the Neanderthal labyrinth appears to mirror aspects of the surrounding petrous pyramid, and both may follow from the phylogenetic impact of Neanderthal brain morphology molding the shape of the posterior cranial fossa. Simply put, they're agreeing, or at least the 2016 and 2013, or 2003 and 2016 papers are actually agreeing that the morphology, and this is what they found out in the 2016 paper, that the differences are just pretty much proportionate to the differences in brain structure, the skeletal structure and the skull and that sort of thing. You know, it's basically a morphological reason for the difference. The functional important arc sizes of the Neanderthal semicircular canals may reflect a pattern of head movement. Wait a minute. Didn't Erika make a big deal about this on locomotion? She said, "Oh, look at the we talk about the ear canals being that indicative of arboreal creatures, you know, tree-dwelling animals, which is true. But this is much different in this case because this involves head movement. not necessarily locomotion. So she's trying to make you think that it reflects locomotion. This has to do with how they turn their heads, whether they turn their heads a certain way or not. And a lot of this difference is just the morphology of the head. But it doesn't really matter in terms of the overall movement of the creature in itself. And so that's a big difference from the Australopithecines when their movement is arboreal tree dwelling, that they have to be able to walk along tree branches, and the fact that they were designed for tree dwelling purposes. So in this case, the head movement is the only thing that's really being affected by this, is the way they move their heads, essentially. So this is not the same as in the case of the Australopithecines, which he tried to make it look like it was. Head movements different from that of modern humans, possibly related to aspects of locomotive behavior. So in other words, they say it's possibly related to locomotive behavior. That's interesting because that means they're not really saying that it is. They're saying it could be. Okay, that's the key right there. They're saying it might be. Now it turns out that it's not the case, but that they're throwing out that as a possibility. And the kinetic properties of their head and neck, which obviously finishes out Erika's quote there. So that's the context of that passage. And she quoted a very small portion of it to make you think that it had anything to do in terms of directly locomotive behavior, when in fact they only actually only had to do with head movement, and they said that it might affect locomotive behavior, which is what they expected in 2003 until much better evidence was found, and in 2016 they concluded that even though that was surprising to them, that this was not the case. Of course, Neanderthals was human, just another people group. Erika doesn't want to acknowledge that, but that's true. They're not another species. They're another people group. They're another group, just no different than any other nationality that exists today. They just have some morphological differences, probably due to some adaptation, probably due to similar mutations, due to inbreeding. We go all over that throughout the entire video. So what happens now? Well, Erika will probably push back on this and say, okay, then you can't say that about the differences between the Australopithecines and human inner ear, but you can, because the evidence for the remains of the Australopithecines show, as Erika herself admitted, arboreal lifestyle. In other words, tree dwelling lifestyle. She tried to argue, well, maybe they could be quadrupedal in trees and bipedal on the ground, but that's silly. For start with, that's actually reverse. We would expect them to be more bipedal in trees than we would on the ground, since they have to walk along branches and stuff. So that's just silly to have them, in one way or the other. But I would say that it would be based on a case-by-case basis, not case-by-case between Australopithecines or between Neanderthals, but rather case-by-case basis in terms of the situation. We look at Neanderthals. The reason why we know the differences do not affect it overall is because it's proportionate to the size of the skull and the body mass and other types of things that we expect. But the overall similarity is almost identical when we look at the overall similarity like that. And but we can't say that between Australopithecines and modern humans. So that's the difference. So I don't know how Erika would push back on that at this point. The fact of the matter is that this is coming from a recent paper, the most recent I could find on Google Scholar. All you had to do is do a Google Scholar search. That's all you would have to have done to find the paper. It's literally at the top of the results. And it's the most recent I could find, because I even looked up Neanderthals inner ear 2024 to see if I can find anything recent. And there was a bunch of other stuff that had nothing to do with the inner ear, and in some cases nothing to do with Neanderthals. So and I found one paper that had something to do with inner ear, but had nothing to do with Neanderthals inner ear. So the 2016 paper was the most recent I could find on Neanderthals inner ear, and its conclusion was that overall they are almost identical to each other, modern humans and Neanderthals, especially when compared to apes, which they consider to be very distant from apes. There's some similarities, but it's not a lot, uh, and far more removed from apes. Um, but anyway, I want to add that in. I will be including that a link in the description box below to that paper if you want to review it in light of Erika's comments on the inner ear. But I thought that was interesting, so let me know what you think in the comments, of course, and enjoy the rest of the video.
A lot of what she presents is misleading, and she's, as they're talking about now, about half truths and misinformation. It appears I'm pretty skeptical of being able to preserve that much detail in the human skull, being as old as we know they are. And therefore, I wouldn't think that she would have it. It would have the detail to make those comparisons. I might have some evidence of it, but I'd want to look to see what it is.
Right.
But again, when you're talking about bodies that have been dead for a couple thousand years, there's a problem in making comparisons.
Yeah, make interpretations. The inner ear has what's called the equilibrium, which is
Right.
our balance. Would the equilibrium something that can be preserved in fossils or not be preserved in fossils?
That's what I just question whether that could be. What she's talking about is the tubes that deal with our ability to balance. And so,
And you'd have to look at the fossil evidence if that's the case.
yeah,
If that
the ear ossicles, etc. You'd have to look at the whole,
right.
especially the part that deals with balance.
So you would support the idea that morphology does not automatically mean difference in species and that sort of thing. And of course, with humans, we do consider humans. I mean, the way generally understood is that we don't really think of ourselves as species, like the way we would think of animals and so forth. It's
Right.
kind of hard to really picture that because humans are aware of self. They have a concept of self, personal identity, and so we value what it means to be human, and we're even appalled at the very idea that there were people in the past that looked at different quote unquote races and assumed that they were inferior to other races, what's typically, ironically, called social Darwinism. The idea that somehow that other races are inferior to other races and other races are superior to them. Alexander the Great thought that all Greeks were superior to other groups. Hitler thought that the Germans were superior to all other races and things like
Right. The Aryans. The Aryans. Yeah.
do you see this as the logical implication, even if modern day evolutionists is not willing to go that far, because I don't think that they would be consistent with it. But would you say that that social Darwinism is the logical implication of that type of view?
Well, of course, she can be racist in this area because there are not many people walking around that say they're 100% Neanderthal. So a lot of people walking around that have traits, but she's not attacking any specific group that's alive, and so therefore it's racism. But it's racism. It's hard to call her out on it because, well, the group she's talking about are blended in, intermarried with the rest of us,
Um,
intermarried with other Europeans
right.
like me.
And Dr. Peter Line had, in the quote that I quoted, had mentioned that because of the fact that there's interbreeding going on and humans or modern humans and Neanderthals are all have interbreeded together. So by definition, they are one species. Um,
Right.
because there's Neanderthal DNA in our genetics and that sort of thing. And I think you mentioned you had your DNA done and found your like what was that 5% or something like that?
Yeah, around 3%
3%.
Neanderthal.
Yes, and a lot of people from Europe will have Neanderthal DNA in them in some sense.
Which is what they found.
Yeah.
Yep.
You mentioned in your presentation that there is evidence of their humanity, such as the fact that they build fire, and that actually brings up an interesting point of the kind of technology that they would have actually had available to them. They were far more sophisticated than what evolutionists originally believed they were. There's cave paintings and artwork. They buried their dead. I think you mentioned something about modern humans and Neanderthals being found side by side in burial sites. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah.
All right. But and there's of course a lot of interbreeding between what we would consider to be modern humans and Neanderthals as well. There's a lot of breeding between them. Uh, right.
Yep. That's true.
Awesome. All right. They did the artwork in caves that they found cave paintings and stuff.
Yeah. Many. Obviously, they didn't sign them, so
Right.
it's not always easy to determine. I didn't sign my name in the painting,
They didn't autograph.
but there's so many of them. We can look at patterns, and they can guess, at least get some good guesses as to who did it
Right.
and
It
who
also
did
means
the
they
paintings.
value life.
There's certain traits that are common.
Right. And it also means they value life, the fact that they buried their dead, and put flowers on the
Oh
grave.
yeah, that was
Um, that I thought that was very interesting. I guess we're getting closer to the end of our time together. Is there any final words? I know there's a lot of uh uh there's often uncomfortable subject matters that get brought up, like racial tension and things like that, and social Darwinism and that sort of thing. But the reality is that this kind of looking at Neanderthals and seeing them as a separate species and trying to somehow lessen their humanity. There, there, there's a lot that could be said about that in many ways, and there's obviously a lot of ethical issues with that involved as well. But do you want to, given the touchy nature of this subject matter because of how evolutionists are viewing Neanderthals, do you want to give kind of like a final word for discussion on that particular issue involving Neanderthals and um, them being just another people group and what the evidence clearly seems to show?
well. My focus has been on the fact that evolution has been enormously racist, and a major reason we've had so much racism in this country, as well as other countries, is because of evolutionary teaching. I'm just getting through a book now that quotes Darwin and then quotes Mein Kampf, Adolf Hitler's book. And boy, the quotes are so similar. Obviously, and I don't think he took it directly from Darwin, but I think Darwin's ideas were translated into German by Ernst Haeckel. And I think Hitler got a lot of his ideas from Ernst Haeckel and other evolutionists, other racists. And so therefore, it's clearly similarity between evolution and the racism that we've seen in the past century, not only in America, but of course in Nazi Germany and other places. So, so many. I have a couple of books here. Let's see if I can get the titles here. Here's one.
Evil Illusion. I don't have that one.
You have what? You have that one?
I don't have that one. No.
You don't? Okay. and then DNA delusion.
DNA delusion.
These are done by a dentist who's concerned, but does a good job, maybe extreme in some cases, but does a good job of explaining the DNA delusion and evil illusion, and showing indeed the racism involved. A lot of the claims relative to DNA and evolution are wrong, and he does a good job. But there are a lot of good books out there which really very clearly show the problems and harm that evolution has done. That's one of my interests, is the harm that evolution has done. And just recently reviewed a paper about how evolution was critically important in what happened in South Africa with apartheid. And Darwin was directly involved in his ideas, were directly involved in the apartheid and the civil war that they had in South Africa. And it's interesting that the South African government was able to overcome that by applying Christianity. And Nelson Mandela, a good example where he applied Christianity, and that's how he was able to enormously reduce antagonism between the whites and the blacks. And that's why when the vote came along, he had not only majority black vote, which of course you expect, but he also had a significant portion of the white vote. And so he was the first black president, and he was able to put into practice his policies. One good example was when he was in jail for 26 years. He was in jail in South Africa, and one of the guards had a lawsuit going on related to an accident. And of course, Nelson Mandela was an attorney. So Nelson Mandela helped him enormously deal with his lawsuit. And so you ended up with an inmate and a guard that became very good friends, very supportive of each other. And Nelson Mandela's character was basically he applied Christian love toward everybody, including his jailer. And of course, generally, inmates don't have a good relationship with their jailers. There generally is antagonism there, or there's a potential of antagonism, and he did. And there are good reasons why he did, good reasons why his jailer had a lot of respect for Nelson Mandela. And that was true not only with his jailer, but with many other people. And so, indeed, the stuff that I've done, and I've got many more articles I plan to write, that evolution has been horrible in our country. It's done a huge amount of harm, not only in America, but in the world. And it's well documented, and really it's not debated at all. Just the history books are there, the documents are there.
Right. That's the influence of Charles of Darwinism. You know, that would be that would be one of the problems with the intensity of the conversations, because we're dealing with a view that literally sees humans as animals, and that we don't have a purpose in the world, in life. And one of the issues, one of the things that the atheists will sit there try to argue is that Christianity has had a negative effect on history. But when you actually look at they'll bring up some extreme examples like the Crusades or the witch trials or something like that. And of course, at least with the Salem witch trials, I know it actually had nothing to do with Christianity. If you actually read the history on that, it's more to do with people who had problems with other people, and they just simply try to abuse the idea of the Bible and Christianity to try to argue for that. But it had nothing to do with religion. But any given case, but there are some extreme examples that people point to, like the Crusades, for example. But then they miss that's kind of cherry picking, because it misses all the really good stuff that have come where people have been motivated by Christianity, such as to produce orphanages, for example. And the first hospitals were also produced by Christians as well. So Christianity had a very positive influence in the world.
Have you thought about having a creation meeting at your church? Would they support this and getting other churches involved? And I'll be actually tomorrow. I'm leaving to Grand Rapids, the church that is doing that very same thing.
I wouldn't
And
mind.
I'll be meeting together with a number of people. And then Tuesday we have a creation meeting in Grand Rapids. And so we hope a lot of outsiders that don't go to that church will attend my presentation on Sunday. And so it's one good way of getting people together and knowing who's involved in this movement and reinforcing each other. And so I'm not sure what church you go to, but that's a possibility that you might want to talk to your elders, your pastor about.
Yeah,
What state? What you're in? What in Illinois?
no, Tennessee.
You're in what?
Tennessee.
You're in Tennessee. Okay.
But I don't have any real control over, what goes on in my church. So I don't know. That's something that I have to bring up to the pastor. But I do know that
Yeah, you just bring it up.
I
That's
have.
often how I end up going to churches.
Right.
Somebody, a member of the congregation, brings it up, makes a proposal.
I
And
have.
they may be supportive, they may not.
Right. I have participated in creation meetings online. Dr. Carl Werner has been having like several in months, where everybody would come online. It's just intended to strengthen believers. No critics are allowed to come to these meetings. It's primarily for YEC positions, people that hold YEC positions to strengthen other believers in the faith and the reliability of the Bible and that sort of thing. And so I've come to those meetings several times because I've had Dr. Carl Werner on my channel before, and I'm going to have him again too when his schedule clears up. But it's been nice you joining me on this for this big Neanderthal discussion, and I thought you gave a really, really good presentation. I'm hoping to see. I sent Dr. Peter Line an invitation for a meeting. I'm hoping that we can, me and Dr. Line can discuss these morphological differences and a little bit further and that sort of thing. He kind of had short notice, and when he brought together when he sent me the thing that he sent me, and he had kind of short notice on it, and I said, if that's a short notice, then I would love to see a chance that you have more of a time to prepare, because that was actually really, really good.
I think he has a PhD in neurology, if I recall.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's very bright, very good researcher. You can tell by the articles in my book, he doesn't have a page of references, but 6 pages of references.
Right.
So he's done very, very careful research. And I'd like to get that book out further, but books tend to sell that are written for laymen. And when people look at all the references in my book, they say, well, I prefer to buy some other book of yours. So it has not been a bestseller. But on the other hand, I think it's one of the most important books because it's the only book that really carefully refutes claims of human evolution. And no other book is even close. There are a lot of books that do a good job. They're layman's terms, but this is a scholarly refutation of so much of what's accepted by the human evolutionists.
You're talking about apes as ancestors?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was actually a very good book. I really like it. I really enjoyed it. If you ever want to have one particular book that just absolutely defeats the idea of human evolution, I would strongly recommend getting Apes as Ancestors. I know when you sent me this book originally, Amazon didn't have it accessible at the time. Is it accessible now on Amazon?
No, we're trying to get it back on Amazon, but it's just, again, it's not a bestseller. So my bestseller by far is my Hitler book. I bet I've sold, I don't know, 30,000 copies of the Hitler book. So that, and when I go out and speak, I invariably sell out. Even if I bring a whole pile of them, I invariably or almost always sell out. So
I know we had talked about that, but you also wrote an article recently called Neanderthals Are Us as well.
Yeah.
It was interesting. And I read that one as well on your website. And of course, I will be linking your website in the description box below for everybody else who wants to go there and check out more of your content as well. So do you have any final words before we?
No, just good to be with you and good to get the word out. So
yes, awesome. I really appreciate everything that you do for the Church of Jesus Christ, because I really enjoy reading your stuff, and I enjoy reading your articles. I know you've written some stuff with Dr. Jeffrey Tompkins as well. So it's been great having you on here.
okay, yeah, good to be on here and hope to be on another podcast of you that you bring out. bring out.
Right. All right.
Good. Thanks.
All right.
Okay.
All right. God bless.
God bless you. Take care.
You too. Thank you for joining me on Apologetics 101 and this episode of Are We Apes? The discussion on alleged human evolution. And in today's video, we had discussed the Neanderthal. This was my big Neanderthal video. I wanted to really delve deep into the subject matter. I thought Dr. Bergman did an excellent job with his presentation. We had an excellent Q&A session and discussion. I added a few more things into the video concerning what Erika had claimed about Neanderthals' inner ear. Obviously, there was a lot of emphasis on talking about Neanderthals as a people group, not a species, and that sort of thing, and discussing that. And so I thought this went really, really well. I enjoyed my discussion. I always enjoy my discussions with Dr. Bergman, and I really appreciate him being on. Of course, I will include a link, like I said, in the description box below to his website. I will also include a link to his newest article that I found, Neanderthals Are Us. I will include a link to that article as well. And I also will include some links to the 2003 paper that was referenced by Erika, and the 2016 paper that showed that actually trumps her claims there on the 2003 paper, because it's more recent. It deals with a much more robust sampling of evidence, and it was able to compare it to modern humans in the process as well. And so I'm going to include a link to that paper in the description box below as well. And don't forget to like the video. Giving the video a thumbs up does actually help this information get out to more people. Obviously, subscribe to my channel, hit that notification bell. Don't forget to drop me a comment below, and I will see you on the next one. And you guys, stay in the know.